Welcome to episode 237 of The Numbers Game. I'm Jase. I'm here with Nick, and we've got Marty back with us today. If you listen to all the episodes in sequence, Marty, great to have you back. How's it going, mate? What have you got for us today?
Going well, mate. Going well. But I have to throw the question out to you. Do you feel like you've ever underperformed in your career?
Oof. You're targeting
sorry
me
to
straight
hit you
up?
with that.
Yeah. No, I've always been a high performer. I'm
I like that confidence.
I'm astounded that you sat there and thought about it.
Well, I had to think about all the different jobs I've done and just gone, was there one that I kind of pulled the foot off the accelerator and didn't do properly? But in the quick recap and thought then that I had to go through my entire life of work, anything that I do, I throw myself into it. I want to be the best at it.
Hang on.
Here we go.
All right. Give me, what was the first job you had?
Macca's.
You went in there and gave 110% every day at Macca's.
Within 15 to 18, it was, start, become a crew trainer, become a crew training coordinator, become a supervisor, become a manager. And then between 18 and 21 was, absolutely smashing it. Great results, winning awards, had like the best.
Never let a burger slip by at sort of 90% quality because,
Never spat in one just because someone pissed you off?
And look, no, actually, this is where it probably came from. Macca's teaches you systems and processes, and every burger, every cheeseburger you get around the world should be exactly the same. And that for me was like, and then when you're teaching other people, I had a young team and this becoming a manager and a leader and wanting to be good at what you do and drive performance, which I think, this is where this conversation is probably going. It was then about teaching the rest of the team that the better they performed, the more successful we were, then the better outcomes that we got as an entire team. So for me at McDonald's, it might have been letting them know, oh, look, I'm not meant to do it. I'll give you a free meal when the shift is over. If you absolutely smash it tonight, we get every meal dangling out that window. So it's a great experience through the drive-through. When you finish your shift, I'll give you a free meal. Mate, tell me a 15-year-old kid that works at Macca's that isn't excited by a free meal. I had them working like you wouldn't believe.
Well, Marty, Jase is a 10 out of 10. So do you want to ask me the question?
Well, just before we go to you here, Nick, it's like, this is the epitome of high performance in action here, that even when the high performance is challenged, they're already maneuvering through to ensure that, they're drawing the dots to high performance in the future. So very impressive. But Nick, I'm sure you've had a day where you've come away from work thinking, bloody hell, I don't know if I got the best out of myself that day.
Oh, plenty, mate. Yeah, plenty.
How do you feel when that happens? Like, what do you do about it when it happens?
Okay, so let's be serious now. How do I feel? Definitely disappointed. I guess you do try and make up for it, but I think sometimes you need to accept you're not at your best as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing, accepting that sometimes you're just not at your best.
Well, there's days you just get frustrated with yourself. Like sometimes you might be trying your best, but things just aren't going to plan. But I think the difference is you're aware of it. And I think that's that's the pivotal difference between people that progress and that people sometimes are unaware in poor performance. But I was chatting to another business owner just 2 days ago, and it was interesting. I said to him, How much do you think poor performance has cost you, given your team's poor performance has cost you over the journey, like bad hires, not developing staff? And he goes, millions, like literally millions. And coming away from that question, asking the question, sometimes you ask the question you need to hear yourself, right? And I thought the same thing. Goodness me, how many times have you let poor performance just go along par for the course without really addressing it? And there's different reasons why, we all don't address it sometimes, and sometimes when we do. But I go, what is the cost of that to a business? Not only to the person that you're dealing with in regards to the poor performance, but just as a business cost in general. It must be millions. If you're hiring staff, have to be millions and millions. It actually scares me. Sometimes it's not the money you make, it's the money you don't make because of not taking, strong actions around your own performance culture.
So why do you think that is? If people know it and they don't do anything about it, and the ramifications are obviously considerably large, why?
I think they get just distracted with busyness, Nick. I think like we talked about a couple of episodes ago, a few episodes back now, But sometimes the business owner's doing so much of the work across different areas that they don't really address the problem that is the real core problem. And I think sometimes it could be the fear of addressing it with the individual. I think back to my 30s and go, I really struggled with that. When people were underperforming, I'd get really frustrated and angry, but I didn't know how to deal with it effectively. I didn't know how to communicate and maneuver them through that poor performance. So it ends up in a blow up that really doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the development of the person, and it doesn't help your own state of mind either. But I think there'd be a bit of that going on, Nick, because again, I'm 53 now and I've pretty much seen most of it, but it's the difference now in dealing with an underperformer, given the skill sets you pick up along the way, and even leveraging off HR and getting insight as to what to do and how to effectively work through that, is just chalk and cheese. But I think just people just sweep it under the carpet and hope that it gets better, but it never does. Jase, have you come across that? I guess we all have.
It's resonating hard because we've had probably one of our more challenging years just with, we turned over a couple of team members at the start of the year. We then started trying to rehire for the more senior kind of roles. And, the not just the financial cost, but the cultural cost of some of the wrong hires that we made. And, I'd love to sit on this podcast and pretend that Future Advisory is perfect and we're having the best year ever and life's good and rosy. But, you can make a few little small choices in business that can have dramatic and huge, profound effects on the business. And unfortunately for us, we started the first half of this year, we landed a couple of wrong hires. These people weren't bad people, but they weren't necessarily great culture fits, and their performance kind of had an impact on other people's performance. And all of a sudden, the cost of keeping people around, and we've done it a few times. I mean, this is why I'm actually really interested in unpacking this episode, is that cost of keeping people around when you think it's going to get better, or, give them a little bit more of a chance. But, how long is too long, right? Like, is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Should you know after 12 months? And unfortunately, we've made the mistake of holding on to people, rather than focusing on what does a high performer look like and how do I make sure I just keep high performers in my business. Sometimes you make excuses like, oh, it's really hard to hire in our industry. Oh, it's hard to find that particular role. We better just hold on, as opposed to not thinking about the financial and cultural damage it does by holding on to the wrong person.
It's a great point, because sometimes you'll fill a position rather than think about who's optimal in that position. And you need to know metrics around that. I think past performance is always a great indicator of future performance too, in a better environment. They say that's not the case in shares, but I think with people it generally is. You want a good track record. But I think the systemic problem too is, if you allow that to fester, then you very quickly can become an average company. Like if the expectation's not set where the bar's high, then all of a sudden you could be in an environment of a really challenging environment of people just underperforming across the board. And I think we've always, at Innovate, held a very high performance culture, and you still get people that slip through the cracks on that too. But again, there's an expectation that's set very early days, even in the hiring process, of what the expectation is, what's expected to be delivered in the first 6 months, even the first week. There's everything is really communicated at the early stages. And if for some reason the activity and the trend isn't on that upward spiral, then it enables you to quickly be able to communicate and work out there might be a problem here, and you can take a different course of action to alleviate that problem or try and develop further. But I was thinking about the balance, and what this guy was talking about was just the fine dance about improved performance and setting higher metrics, and also then feeling like virtually an arsehole for doing it, right? And I said, that's because the methodology isn't set. And I said, the interesting thing about it was, if you want someone to get a result for your business, you really got to get to understand the person beyond the result you want them to get. So you got to really look into their personal drivers, what motivates them. Is it money? Is it like they want to contribute to a team? what gets them going? Do they want to buy a house? What are they doing in their personal life? Like, you really, even though we talk about tangible targets and KPIs and metrics, the driver of that is a person at the end of the day. So if you can find that alignment between the business values and performance and their own individual values and align those two, then remarkable things can happen. But I just don't think, and whether it's busyness or whatever the case may be, that's not always the case. And then you've got to look out for the people that just there's a touch of laziness and passiveness about their own performance as well, which is different to being underdeveloped, right?
So on that, Marty, what steps would you put in place to find that out about the person? Is it is it send them a survey? Is it regular one-on-one catch-ups? Like personality profiling. So if you're saying, it's important to get to the root of what drives someone and you're working with 10, 20, 30 different team members, what's the process to actually make that a reality? Because you've said it a few times that business owners seem to be too busy not focusing on those things, but I'm probably picking up that is an area that needs focus.
Correct, because it's such an important decision, right? And that's a big financial and cultural decision. But I think the first thing is you have to look at what the performance of that person has been, prior to coming to your business. I think that's the best indicator. If they've been successful and they just might not have an environment that's resourcing them as effectively as it could, then they can go from very good to exceptional. That's an easier path than average to good. And I think that's a key driver. I think communicate, set expectations from the first interview. And good actual interviewees will say, how would you see me doing well at this business? What would your expectations be as a business owner? That's a great question. You go, well, I would be really pleased if you actually just hit the results I'm putting in front of you. But you could have that discussion, and then you would put a set of minimum standards of what the growth curve is in regards to being a high performer within the business and a quality performer in the business. And again, you're not looking to go from A to B overnight, but you're looking for the trend to be going upwards and not to start at ordinary and then just end up plateauing at that point and not seeing any form of development. And you can spend a lot of time trying to develop people through, but some people just aren't right for the job at the end of the day. So having those metrics and having key discussions early, week to week, you can pretty much work out within the first 4 to 6 weeks whether that's going to be, a really good relationship and good performance or not, I reckon.
I think one of the things that I've learnt too, Marty, and we've learnt this together in this business, is being really clear about those metrics up front, definitely in the interview process. So this is the expectation in our business. This is the metrics that we'll look at, the lead indicators as to whether or not you're going to perform. Because in our business, a result or a return on investment can come a fair way down the path. So there's things that we need to see, call it the first 3 months, that are lead indicators that will determine whether or not the performance is going to be there. And being really clear on that, whether it's in the interview process or whether it's with a recruiter, means you get people that are serious and that think they can make that work. And to your point earlier, and people that have already performed, they will see those metrics and those expectations and they'll be okay with it. But I think being clear with them up front will push away anyone who wasn't going to perform in the first place, because that to them will be scary or a problem. And if those metrics are scary, then they're probably not the right person for the role.
Yeah, and they'll actually back away, you're right, from the interview process at that stage. And that's what you want, because you haven't invested in them yet. So it's a key way to go about it.
Yeah, and this is to another extreme, but I had someone tell me one day, talking about sales roles, you should almost try and push them away from the role. It's as if to say, do you know what you're getting yourself into here? Whether it's high performance culture, our team's, best in industry, this is the minimum expectation. Almost try and scare them out of the role. And if they say yes, then you either got a performer or you've got a dreamer. So you're down to kind of 50-50 chance of getting it right,
Well, it impacts too the high performing people within your business. Like if you're carrying a few underperformers and you're not addressing it effectively to improve that performance, it can have a systemic effect on the high performers because you're spending time in the wrong areas, right? In their minds, and they don't like that either. So
Yeah, and you just made me think, obviously referring to our business because I know it, but also calculating the cost of having underperformance. Well, what's the opportunity cost? To your point, then, by not spending time with the high performers, but what we've seen in this business is that standard or minimum level performance going to that next level and everyone going with it. So you kind of create this high performance culture where maybe the person that, I'll use the broking terms, was a 60 mil broker, in our business is a 70 mil broker just because they feel good. Someone next to them's doing it. They feed off each other's energy. So it's probably even hard to quantify what that opportunity cost would be having people that don't perform versus a high performance culture.
yeah, and I think the other thing in regards to even leadership is how you manage those people. If you need to manage them out, that you do it from a corporate responsibility to the business and to the other people in the business. A lot of people, obviously will take it personally, but ultimately you've got, in small to medium business enterprises, you've got other people's jobs on the line. You've got shareholder value on the line, and a lot of people don't think about that. But there is a corporate responsibility that if that person is not performing, that you're doing them a favor ultimately, because they'll go to another environment where they can potentially have a better fit. But your ultimate responsibility is to make sure that the business is okay and that the jobs in the business are okay as well. So and again, I've changed my perspective, because in the early days I always felt bad. Like I always felt horrible when you had to do something like that. You had to actually tell people they had to go. And I don't love it. Don't get me wrong. It's not something anyone enjoys, but I have a methodology now, and that's thanks to HR and learning from HR, good instruction from them, that you actually go, okay, you can follow a course and there's a right way to go about it. You can be confident in the metrics that you're setting. You can be confident in the performance reviews and improvement programs, and hopefully there's a bounce off those. But if not, there's a way to go about it. So I think that gives a lot of comfort in something that's a very difficult thing to do. And to me, that was a skill gap. And I'm glad I've bridged that skill gap, because I can see how vitally important it is for a SME business.
Yeah, well, it's super important. I mean, I remember reading Netflix, No Rules, the book by Reed. Is it Reed Hastings? He talks about, in the early days, he had to let go of 20% of his workforce. And let's say there was 400 employees, they fired around 80 people, but they had the same amount of work to do. And what they ended up finding happening was that the remaining 320 people actually did all of the work of what 400 were doing. But what they found was that because of the bottom 80 performers, all of the other really high performers were going, well, I don't have to work that hard, like much harder, because the person next to me kind of does it at this level. So why should I go above and beyond and go any further or any higher and outperform? So you kind of build this kind of level of like, what is okay performance by holding on to people that aren't high performers.
It's a great link into Nick's point about the rising tide and how important that rising tide of high performance is.
Yeah. And then the flow on from that is, I mean, I think a lot of business owners will have the human side of going, well, that's a good person, right? Like they're actually going okay, because you've got okay performance and then you've got high performance. So I think it's, as you said, putting in framework or levels of acceptable behavior, and, I guess having some processes around it. So you've talked about HR kind of gave you, a bit of a roadmap of how to follow it. I mean, what does it look like? If you've got someone who you think you can get from an okay performer to a high performer, what is the path that you take with them? And then what's the difference then when it's somebody who you just don't see a hope for, to performance manage them out of the business? Is there a different approach or the same approach?
Great question, because a high performer will bounce off off a performance improvement plan. Like their ego will be pricked, and they want to do well, and you find that next level of performance. And some people actually, that's a motivator. The fear of the loss is actually the motivator to kick them into a new gear. And you hope that once they get to that gear, they can maintain it. But sometimes they can regress too. But then you understand the style of that person. And it's like at footy, you know, there's some players you can go, get the damn ball, pick it up and kick the goal, and don't let me see you do that again. And other people you go, look, I'd prefer you just go into the pack and get another possession and find your way through to goal. So, you know, different tones and different sort of, you know, angles in regards to get there. But I find if someone's going to be a good performer, they can go up a gear and they'll find something different. And then you also, in fairness to them, have to address if there's a skill gap. So is there a skill gap? Do they need development? Do they need resources? Like, what do they need in sort of to bridge that performance difference? So if you're seeing a trend and you're seeing a great attitude and you're seeing performance start to evolve, then you've got hope. But you might be doing the same thing with the poor performer and you just see it, flatlining. Like, it doesn't matter what you say, even if they're slightly enthusiastic, you can see that their tone is still a bit downtrodden. They're basically playing for time, thinking about what the next move is potentially. And they resign, if they feel like there's no way for them to get to where they need to be anyway. So a lot of times people resign prior to a potential sacking.
I love what you said though. Like if you get put on a performance improvement plan and you've got the right attitude, you bounce back and you come back stronger and better than ever. Like if you are a high performer and that's where you want to be and where you want to get to, that's actually your opportunity to work with the person on how to get you to where you want to be, hit those goals, be the best you can be. So I absolutely love that. I never thought about that idea of, because I've never been put on a performance improvement plan.
Obviously.
No, just kidding. No, it's a good mindset and the way to look at it, to go, and then if somebody is, this is what I see now, we do have some HR assistants and we are trying to, increase performance. I think we're going to have the strongest quarter we've ever had. And that's come through a lot of hard work and a lot of energy and effort on getting the team and the mindset to where it needed to be. But, part of that, doing a performance improvement plan, I've probably been scared to do it in the past. I haven't felt like, geez, I don't want to piss someone off. I don't want to lose an employee for doing a performance improvement plan when it feels like, I know they're trying. But now actually with that mindset of going, it's good for them, it's good for us, we're both going to end up somewhere better off in the short to medium term future, then why wouldn't we do it? It's silly not to.
Well, you're going to get the most amount of resources at that time, moving through that performance plan and, linking it into accountability. As long as the accountability on the metrics start to trend and there's improvement. And the other thing is that once someone hits a certain level and they break through, it's very rare they regress unless it's attitudinal. So it's like once you can get them to a certain level and you create a new foundation at that higher level, generally you've got now proof of concept that they can be developed and they can grow, which offers the opportunity for further progression, and you can resource them for further progression moving forward. So that's pretty exciting. Now, whether that takes a performance improvement plan or it happens just in general, but that's what you're looking for. And I guarantee you, Nick will back me up on this, no doubt. When you put someone in a circumstance that really stretches them, initially they're going, holy crap, but then they find something. And then they find efficiencies that they didn't know they have. And they find, personal resources that start to develop that can handle this new level. And then all of a sudden they find this, this new level becomes the norm.
Well, it's your identity, right? And we've heard this over and over. I think the Habits books talks about this, but you've got to, once you create that new identity and, in relation to performance, this is who I am now. To your point, it just becomes a norm, and then you create habits that are more in line with that new identity. That this is the level of performance that is just standard for me now. And you're right. They don't go backwards, and I think almost people, if they have an identity set in their mind that's maybe at 50% capacity of where they could be, they'll almost self-sabotage to stay at that identity. So you've got to get get them to have a to jump outside, have a look in, and say, well, no, what, that's not me. I'm this person. I'm not a 50 mil broker. I'm a 100 mil broker. So I'll just do the activity I've got to do to get there. Versus where I think a lot of people self-sabotage.
Oh, you've nailed it, Nick. You've absolutely nailed it. You can, and as a leader and as a coach, you can get higher performance for a period of time, but if the identity is not aligned, it will bounce back to the poorer performance as soon as you let them go and do their own thing. So it's that's a great observation for people, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for patterns of behaviour in regards to performance. It's really it's understated, but if you can pick up patterns and you can see improvement on improvement, then that's pretty exciting. But if you're seeing, and the other thing you've got to take into account, if you have had a good performer, consistent good performer, and they fall away, really have a good conversation around it, because again, you don't know what goes on in people's lives. There might be problems at home. They might be going through a rough patch. So you see that happen as well, and that's where empathy and compassion need to come in, because someone's been very loyal and done well for the business and been a great contributor, and that's where you do have a little bit more leeway to say, okay, well, what do you need to move through this? Do you need a day off? Do you need to go and see someone? Can we back you up on that? And that's where that human element can come in a little bit further.
On the human side, right? I think that's where I've also struggled a bit in the past, getting too close personally, having deep care for someone. You talked about, empathy and compassion. How do you balance caring for people and then making tough calls?
Yeah, well, that's an easy one now. If it's a friend, I go, can I have a discussion outside our friendship for a moment? Frame it up, because it comes back to the performance, so.
Marty, you said something earlier that just is so spot on. I'm referring to you now, Jase. You've got a responsibility to
Correct.
40 people. So, the first thing is that responsibility is higher than being nice to an underperformer. But the reality is, if they're underperforming in your role, they're not getting the best out of themselves anyway. So I think you're actually, this is the one thing I learned, that the sooner you can bring it to the surface and talk to them, they either go up a level in performance, or they go and find a job that's more suited to them. So I think you're actually doing them a disservice by not hitting it on the head, and I've learnt that the hard way too, mate, myself. So
Very helpful. Appreciate it.
No, it is. It's a good point. It's always got to come back to, there's two conversations in that one. There's the business conversation, and then it's supporting the person. If something has gone wrong for them, supporting the person outside of the metrics, but the metrics are still the core on what needs to be achieved. And you'll pick it up. You'll pick up what's going on in the actual metrics. Like, we could tell from week to week, whether it's leads, whether it's lodgements, whether it's settlements. It's the data never lies. You can torture data, and it'll tell you exactly where a person's at, and then you can have discussions around it.
Yeah, well, I think that other mindset there that you dropped, Nick, or the thought of that looking after that one person and to the detriment of up to 29 or 30 other people, what is that saying to the rest of the team? That's
how does that look?
Powerful thought, very thought provoking.
And I lost a friendship over doing that, Jase, in the early days, because whether I had the conversation the way it should have been had might be a different story. But again, I had to protect the business, at the end of the day, and lost a good friendship over it. But I could have lost the business and lost everyone's livelihood. And, you just have to make those stern calls. And, I guess at the end of the day, people will think what they think, but you haven't collapsed the whole entity by letting that sort of behaviour foster.
Marty, so question. If someone is running a small business, they're obviously good salespeople, but might lack some business acumen, which is more than okay. Where do you start with this stuff? So obviously we've talked about what you need to do to attack it. How do you build out the minimum level or minimum expectations? Like,
yeah,
where does that start? Like, how do I even know what those minimum expectations are? Because I might be, a super salesperson at 10 out of 10, working my way up through the Macca's chain, but you don't necessarily need 10 of those in your business, for example. So how do I build out those metrics? Like, if I don't know, can I talk to you? Like, how do you start?
Yeah, well, street smarts is going to come from my mouth on this, because to me, I looked at, like, even in broking, I looked at the industry average was about 1.2 mil, 1.3 mil in settlements, which I thought was atrocious. I go, why would you leave any career to go and do that? But that's the industry average. So I never thought that was a good idea. So to me, it had to be 3 times industry average. Because if you want to be average, you do average things, you get average results. Well, that's the environment that you're fostering. So to me, it was always, and there's subtleties in this. So let's say you set the benchmark 3 times higher as to what the expectation is. Now, generally the first response is, holy crap, like shock. There's no way. This is a joke. And you go, well, sit with it for a bit, because you're coming at it from a business level first. So you're going, what do I want the business to do? And do for me running this business. And then you can work backwards and go, all right, where are we at? What's the gap? And what qualities do we need to bring to the table in order to start trending towards that result? Now, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's going to happen in time, because you've now set a different benchmark expectation for the business. So your ideal is that the 3 times above industry average becomes the norm for your business, becomes the average for your business, right? At a whole different level. Now, you need to start developing people. How do you give them a point of difference that's separate to what everyone else is doing? It might only be something little, but it's something you can deliver to the market that is a unique point of difference. Now you instill confidence in the salesperson. So you develop the salesperson, give them confidence to put it out there in the market. Guess what starts to happen as you get momentum? As you get momentum, confidence builds. All of a sudden, they hear other people in the industry doing that lower performance going, oh, well, I'm doubling that, or I'm 1.5 times that. Confidence builds. Then you start drawing good people to your business that want to be a part of that. So you get this flywheel effect across a lot of different areas by actually setting the expectation. And as leaders of a business and owners of a business, it's up to us. It's confidence in our own selves to be able to set that and then map that journey as to what it looks like. What do we want to be known for in this business? Do we want to be average? No. And we don't want one person shooting the lights out and no one else, because that's another problem in itself. We want that rising tide effect, because that's where everyone wins, including the business owner. That's where there's power. It takes away, the risk of having one person doing all the volumes. It's like you want that rising tide, and then you want to keep building and compounding on that. So that's what I do. I'd sit down and just write out, what does this look like? Like, scare yourself. Don't terrify yourself, but just scare yourself a little and go, what does this look like? Even if it's double, if you're doing well, what does it look like? Where do we need to be? What resources do we need to put in to support our people to get there? What's our point of difference in the market? You start to bring different qualities in your thinking and the way you start planning and modeling out the journey to get there. And then you look back in 3 years' time and you go, oh yeah, that's just what we do. You're at that next foundation where you're probably going to stretch again, right, in a new way. But that's the enjoyment of it. That's the enjoyment of progress. And that's what Nick was talking about. You get juiced up talking to other people doing really well, within the business, and everyone's on that exciting journey together. It's invigorating, really.
Yeah, your high performers are watching how you handle your low performers. So basically, as Marty is saying, either raise the bar or your whole team will just be okay with standard, and they'll think that the standards don't matter. For those listening, though, I know where I'd be starting. I'd be starting by reaching out to Marty. I know for a fact that you've put high-performing teams in place, and that's what I would be doing. And I probably will reach out to you, Marty, because I've missed chatting to you. And for those listening out there, give us a like, give us a follow. Definitely reach out to Marty. He's on LinkedIn. You can find him on Instagram. Actually, he's everywhere. He's the man of the people. We've absolutely loved this episode from you today, Marty. And until next time.
Do you want fries with that, Jase? Keep performing, mate. Keep performing. I love that. Game over.
This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. The conversations are of a general nature and do not qualify as financial or tax advice. We recommend before you make any financial decisions, you consult a licensed professional. Individuals on the podcast may hold positions in the companies discussed.